When it comes to the areas in your life where you feel like you are struggling, whether it's your relationships, your career, your physical body, your financial body, your home life, if you are struggling in those, it's because you suck at keeping a promise to yourself. If you're suffering in any of the 10 most important areas of your life, it's because you're out of personal integrity. You want something, but you're not willing to do the work, or you say you're going to do it and then you get tired, or you want to show up and do more for yourself, for your marriage, for your relationship with your kids, and then you revert to old ways. However, if there's a part of your life that doesn't feel good, then it's up to you to be in enough integrity within yourself to stand up and take action to make it better.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how easy it is for marriage to take a back seat. But unlike your parents' marriage, your marriage can feel good while raising kids and doesn't have to feel hard. It can look like having each other's backs, even flirting and looking forward to spending time with each other. And I'm here to help you. So join me here each week as we dive into what it takes for your marriage to become something you enjoy again, from how to handle conflict better and bringing that spark back into your relationship. If you're ready for your marriage to feel good again, this podcast is for you. Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood podcast. I am so excited to talk about what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, first of all, I have an incredible guest here, Dena Farash. We're going to be talking about something that moms often do that we need to talk more about because it is screwing up everything. And that's keeping promises to yourself. I don't know about you, but I have done this many times where I've broken my promises to myself because I felt like other people's wants and needs were more important than my own needs. And if you've been here for a while, you know that that's not what we're about, okay? We're all about stopping that because we are just as important as other people. So, hello, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're listening to this. And welcome, Dena.
Thanks so much for having me, Michelle. I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you today.
Yeah, this is such a powerful topic we're going to get into, and I can't wait to see what happens out of this. But before we get into it, I wanted to introduce Dena to you all. Dena is a positive discipline educator, author, speaker, and the founder of the Mindful Mom Revolution, an online space for mothers to come together to deliberately create community, inspiration, and progress through awareness of their thoughts and inspired actions in their parenting. Dena loves to share with women how they become the best version of themselves while raising the best version of their kids. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. Can you share with us where you live and how old your kids are?
Absolutely. I am an East Coast girl. I am in New Jersey, and I have 3 children who are 9, 8, and 4.
I love how this podcast has allowed me to talk to so many different people that I wouldn't have otherwise. Like, we're going from California to the East Coast. This is so awesome. And me and Dena vibe so well. So I know you're going to love this episode and what she has to share. So, what inspired you to work with moms?
That's probably one of the most common questions I get. And the truth of the matter is, I got here because I lost my mind. I very quickly in my life transitioned from being a girlfriend to a wife to a mom of 1, and then 18 months later, a mom of 2, and I lost myself completely. And so while I struggled to figure out who I was in the midst of my motherhood, I was suffering. And because I was suffering, I was inflicting suffering on my children and my husband. And so one day I was counting down the seconds until my husband came home. I was going to safely toss the children his way and give myself that break, right, by going to the supermarket by myself. And he walked in the door and I was like, Mike, I got to go. I got to run to the supermarket. I just need a minute. And he's like, sorry, Dena. He looked right at me. He said, I'm meeting a buddy at the gym in 15 minutes. And he walked right past me and the kids and got in the shower to get ready for the gym. And I ran outside into my backyards. The kids, of course, were safe watching TV. They had 1,800 snacks. And I ran outside and I started having a panic attack. And I was just praying and looking up at God and saying, why am I so miserable? And God said back to me, he said, Dena, you have to chill. And, because I'm from Jersey, God and I had this little dialogue, and I looked back at God and I said, what do you mean? And God was like, why don't you start meditating? Do something that helps you feel better. And so in that moment, I made a deal with myself. I was at a very fragile place in my own motherhood. I needed to feel like I could accomplish things outside of just doing the dishes for the day or doing the laundry. And I needed to feel successful because everything else that I was trying felt overwhelming. I felt like I was failing all the time, and that was weighing on me so heavily. So I made a deal with myself in that moment. And I said, okay, God, I'm going to try meditating. I'm going to try it for 30 days and I can give it 5 minutes a day because that felt achievable for me. It felt like something I could easily succeed at. Even though I didn't know what I was doing, or if I didn't know I was doing it right, I could dedicate 5 minutes a day to making myself feel better. And within weeks, my whole life started to change. So I started sharing about it and I created a Facebook group. And within 2 days, there were 100 other moms that said, yeah, I don't want to feel like crap as a mom either. And so we created this community together, this intentional community where moms came together to work on themselves, to dedicate time for themselves, if even just 5 minutes a day, so that they could start feeling better. Number one, as a person, as a self, and then secondly, as a mom. And it was really just a social experiment for me in my own home to see if it made a difference. And then it expanded into this community and so much more than that.
Oh, there's so much that happened there. You are trusting in the guidance that you received. I'm not religious, but I fully believe in some form of communication from a higher power. So I call it universe, right? Or spirit guides, whatever. But that's incredible that not only were you willing to hear it, but you were willing to act on it and just be like, okay, clearly I'm just at a loss. I'm just going to do whatever and see what happens. And it turned out so beautifully for you.
And it's really snowballed from there. It was really a willingness to do anything to help myself feel better. And I got there because I was at this place of total loss, of total destruction, of feeling so less than and unable to achieve and produce, which were all things that gave me validation prior to becoming a mom. And so I actually think this ties in perfectly to what we're going to talk about more today. But I needed to set myself up for success, and I needed to be willing to keep a promise to myself. At that point, it wasn't about the kids anymore. It wasn't about my husband. It wasn't about my marriage. It was about what I needed so that I didn't count down the nanoseconds till my support system walked in the door. I needed to feel like I can do this. I'm the right person for this job. And I can do this successfully in a way that feels very fulfilling, because where I was when I started my meditation practice in my home did not feel fulfilling at all.
I think you hit the nail on the head with saying I needed to set myself up for success. Setting yourself up for success in motherhood, in marriage, in life in general. If you're noticing that you're stuck with something, don't keep doing the things that you're doing, okay? Because it's not working. Sit, figure it out, go talk to someone, get help. Set yourself up for success because you do not have to feel miserable or like your kids would be better off without you, or you're the worst kind of mom, or you're the worst kind of wife. No. You just don't have the tools yet to help yourself be that version. And keeping promises to yourself is just the very first step of doing that. So when did you start keeping promises to yourself? And what did that look like for you?
You know, I've always been a really disciplined person. So in many ways, I've been able to achieve a lot of things, especially before becoming a mom. I have done fitness bikini shows and I've deadlifted hundreds of pounds. And there are a lot of physical things that I could keep a discipline for. However, what I lost track of in my own life was understanding that I was a positive person at the core, and then recognizing that I wasn't showing up as that every day. And so that really bothered me, because I knew deep down that I was the type of person that was meant to feel happy, that was meant to feel joy, and was meant to share and inspire others to do so. And motherhood was the perfect excuse to feel like crap every day. Even if I woke up having a good day, I could shift back to this place of comfort. And my comfort, especially in the early years of motherhood, was this sucks. That was my comfort. That was my emotional addiction. That was my mental addiction, always finding reasons to share with you why being a mom sucked, right? And so I needed to show up differently for myself. Number one, for me, because I knew I was a positive person. I knew I was a happy person, but I wasn't living that way. And because I was willing to show up for me, that trickled down to my relationship with my husband, which got better. It trickled down to my relationship with my children, which felt easier when I became willing to show up for myself.
Okay, we need to tackle something because what you just said right now made me think of how having a space for moms is so powerful, because when you are in the wrong community and you are experiencing something really hard in motherhood or marriage, it can go really badly. You can be faced with people who are like trying to toxic positivity your way out of it. Like, no, but motherhood is so magical. And aren't you grateful for them? Some people can't have kids, whatever. It's like, okay, can we just back up a little bit and be real that we can have duality? We can love our children and being a mom and have a hard time sometimes. There aren't enough spaces that allow that part of us. And so we're afraid to say things sometimes because we're going to get criticized. Or on the opposite end, you complain and then other people start complaining and there's no solution out of that. You're just like sitting in your muck. That motherhood is hard. That marriage is hard. And you're just stuck in that. It's just like, no, this is a fact. But it's not a fact at all.
That's right. We have to use a lot of discernment to know when we are being validated or when we are being judged or when we are just going down this commiserating pathway, right? And so ultimately, I think what we all want when we share our truth is just validation. Yeah, that sounds really hard. 2 kids and under 18 months is really hard. Now, I could have easily went out and found other women that wanted to commiserate with me about how
Mhm.
terrible motherhood is, right? Or how terrible my children are. That wasn't the truth. It could have felt good momentarily, but ultimately it would not have helped me to shift my own internals so that I could see more of the beauty that was in my life. Same thing with your marriage, right? It's so easy to find a woman who's willing to talk crap about a man. It's so easy, right?
So
And so I might want to be validated because my husband did something that let me down a little bit, but I'm not looking to bash him, bash our relationship, bash myself, because when I get home from that conversation, I'm only going to see all the negative things that were
yep.
highlighted. And the same thing for everything we do, but motherhood especially. It is so easy these days to find women that are going to tell you that your children are the problem, right? And so you're going to go home then hyper focused on how your children are the problem, when the truth is you are the solution to any problem in your home. And we need more safe spaces so that we can talk about the difficult times that we're having. We can feel validated by them, and then we can feel empowered to make the change to shift that for ourselves.
Yes, we are the solution. And if you're hearing this and you're like, well, why do I always have to be the one who changes? That's not what it is. You get to be the one that changes because you are the only one you have control over. If you're going to expend energy, do it through that. Because if you are using your energy to change your child, to change your husband, that's going to be way more draining, less fruitful. It's like pushing a boulder uphill. But if you actually are willing to look at yourself, how you're showing up, how many promises you're breaking, like your own promises, you're going to notice so much difference in how you show up. Okay, so let's dive into that. Breaking promises. I have my own thoughts about it. I want to hear yours.
Well, I first want to start off by saying this very bold statement. Half of it is the Jersey in me, and half of it is just knowing that this is true. When it comes to the areas in your life where you feel like you are struggling, whether it's your relationships, your career, your physical body, your financial body, your home life, any of those things, if you are struggling in those, it's because you suck at keeping a promise to yourself. And I just want to rip that Band-Aid off real quickly because that's true. If you're suffering in any of the 10 most important areas of your life, it's because you're out of personal integrity. You want something, but you're not willing to do the work, or you say you're going to do it and then you get tired, or you want to show up and do more for yourself, more for your marriage, more for your relationship with your kids, and then you revert to old ways, which is okay to a point because you're human, right? We all make decisions and we take actions based on our conditioning. However, if there's a part of your life that doesn't feel good, then it's up to you to be in enough integrity within yourself to stand up and take action to make it better.
Woo! That was so good, Dena. That was so, so good. And I'm going to second that. That is definitely something I have realized to be true in my life and my clients' lives, like every single person. Life is meant to feel not easy all the time, but easeful. Okay. And if you are feeling like life is one big struggle, it could just mean one small tweak. You just got a kink in your hose. Go find that kink and unkink it. And there's so much power to advocating for yourself, even if it means when it's against what you've been doing. It isn't always about other people. A lot of times it's, hey, how am I out of alignment with what I want? Am I making choices that will help me get what I want? Or am I really comfortable and complaining about the results? That's like a harsh reality for all of us. We all have it.
You nailed that. I think we try our best to avoid discomfort as much as possible because we think that we're meant to be comfortable all the time. However, if you were to lay down the sticks and see where you are when it comes to your own happiness, gratification, and your own fulfillment, if you're not at an 8, 9, 10 in certain areas of your life, well, then it's because you're running away from the things that are making you uncomfortable. But if you want to change anything, you have to be willing to embrace the discomfort. I've been recognizing this a lot more as my children get older and I am forced out again into that mainstream world of sports and school and things of that nature. I'm recognizing that there are two types of women out there. The first type of woman blames everything external, right? If the kids are acting up, it's the kid's fault. If they're having a tough time in their relationship, it's the husband's fault. If work is not going their way, it's the boss's fault, right? And it's this constant projection outward of why is this happening to me? And there's that second type of woman that even when things aren't perfect, understands in her life that she is responsible for everything going on. And she takes ownership and responsibility in creating relationships that feel better and understand that it's not her kids. Perhaps it was because she was stressed out. It's not her husband. Perhaps she never showed him any appreciation. It's not her job. Perhaps she's in a soul-sucking career path that she never wanted anyway. And so we really have to make that distinction between the type of woman that focuses the problems externally and the type of woman who's willing to take on the responsibility of the ownership internally. And once you get there, once you can stand up and say, okay, I am the type of woman who is willing to take responsibility and move forward, well, then we can take action. And when we start to shift, when we take action and we do that consistently.
Yeah. So the first one that you explained, that was me, 1000%. And when I realized that that was me, I was like, well, shit, I am the problem. And then I hated it. But then I got to this place where I'm like, yeah, I might be the problem, but I'm also the solution. And it's so empowering when you get to that space. And this is true for motherhood. This is true for marriage. Like, it really starts with us. And I feel like this is downplayed, right? We're always like, oh, let's fix other people. Well, there's other work that isn't being shared, which is, hey, how well do you know yourself? How well are you caring for yourself? Not the massages and the nail appointments or whatever. Like, those are amazing, right? Don't get me wrong. I love a good pampering. But real self-care, and I have an episode on this, okay? So I'll like reference it in the show notes, whatever. I don't remember the number. But real self-care is actually doing something sustainable, and it's in your everyday choices, like keeping your promises to yourself. And I love that you shared that people have grown up not understanding that life is not about being comfortable all the time. There's a phrase, growing pains, for a reason, okay? And the more comfortable you get with being uncomfortable, that's the sweet spot right there. Because if your kid's throwing a tantrum, you can just observe it for what it is. They're having a hard time. They're dysregulated right now. And so I can just sit here and not take it personally. Or with your husband, if you're arguing with each other, you can be like, I feel this way and you feel this way. It's not a competition. We don't need to get into the back and forth. We can have a productive conversation or know that if we need to take a break through this conversation, it doesn't mean that we don't care about each other, right? I feel like people rush into arguments because they're like, oh, but we have to fix this right away because our marriage is going to like implode if we give it time. But no, it's really just you being uncomfortable and you don't know how to handle it. And it's the same thing with choosing to break your promises because other people have priorities for themselves and they're imposing it on you and you feel uncomfortable with not choosing them. The mom guilt, right? Like, oh, how are they going to perceive me? Does this mean I'm going to be a bad mom, a bad friend, a bad family member, a bad spouse? But you know what? They get to have their feelings. They're not always going to be your problem. Like, if it's a safety issue, okay, all hands on deck. But most times it's not a safety issue. Your kid can wait for a snack if you're having a meal. I did this one thing which seems so simple, but is like a way to just demonstrate how I've been keeping promises to myself. I told myself I'm not going to interrupt my mealtime because my kids can't think to ask for a drink before I sit down. Because, dinner time's crazy, right? Getting food on the table, getting people to do their roles, right? Because I got my kids setting the table and whatever. And then as soon as we sit down in the past, can I have this? Can I have that? And then next thing you know, they're done with dinner and I have a cold meal in front of me. Like, what the hell? That's not okay. And so now I'm like, you have to ask. So you can either wait for me to be done eating or you can get it yourself. Next time, ask me before I sit down. And that felt so liberating to say. I'm not harming them. This is polite anyway for them to learn. It's respectful of me. It's respectful of them knowing how to get what they need. And everybody wins.
I love that. And the example that you gave, you're doing so many things right there. First of all, and you mentioned this earlier, it's having the duality of our emotions. I love my children and I love to be able to sit down and have a hot meal. And the word and there is so imperative because often as women, we use the word but instead of and. And when we do that, especially as a mom, that but brings us to a place of guilt. In your example, I love my kids, but I'm really hungry, but I also want to be a good mom. So I might as well just stand up and get a drink, right? And then you're setting yourself up to lose because in that moment, you don't feel fulfilled. You feel resentful perhaps towards your children because you just want to have that hot meal. So accepting the complexity of the opposite side of emotions with the word and, not excusing it with the word but, will cut off that cycle of guilt immediately. And you're also willing to make your children uncomfortable. We have to be willing to say, especially as moms, that the way we raise resilient kids is by allowing them to have discomfort, right? At the end of the day, we all want our children to be resilient. We want them to take the ebbs and flows of life with a smile on their face and to know that it's always going to get better if they do the work. And so we do that by allowing them to have successful discomfort. So your child's thirsty. Perhaps my 9-year-old never gets water for herself, right? The oldest is used to being waited on hands and foot. And so she will sit on the couch. And if I say no, she will ask her siblings. She is just not used to being uncomfortable because she was raised, at least for the first 18 months of her life, with having a mother that did everything for her. Now, my subsequent kids, who always had to share my time and attention, do things for themselves, right? Because they never had me solely like my first did. But we have to be willing to put our children in uncomfortable situations so that they become productive human beings in our society, right? And that's what we want. I want to just share this one thing because as human beings, we're wired to do one of two things. We're either wired to run towards pleasure or away from pain. And running away from pain is so much easier than running towards pleasure because running towards pleasure forces you first to identify what it is you want, right? Which is a struggle for many moms, but it also asks you to stand up for yourself and work towards achieving it. So what do we do instead? That's hard work, by the way, because it brings up a lot of uncomfortable situations and it puts us in compromising positions where we might have to be new at something or people might have to see us as a beginner. And there's a lot of fear that's wrapped around that. But it's easy to ignore the pain. It's easy to start drinking at 4 or 5 o'clock when you're cooking dinner and numb out the day. It's easy to slam the door and let the kids scream. It's easier to avoid your crumbling marriage because you don't want to deal with the uncomfortable conversations. So we have to be willing to make our own selves uncomfortable so that we can work towards achieving pleasure instead of just ignoring this pain all the time.
I love that you can actually do both. It's not I'm in this camp or I'm in that camp. So for me, whenever I know that I need change, it's because I recognize that I'm trying to run away from pain. So for example, with the dinner thing, it didn't happen like that magically. It happened from me getting pissed off all the time and annoyed at my kids and being like, gosh, I just want to eat. but I was still doing it for them. And so I had to look at it and be like, wait a minute, I'm enabling this to continue happening through my actions. Okay, what do I want? I just want to eat. Okay, cool. What are my boundaries that I'm crossing myself? Because you teach people how to interact with you. And what is my priority? My priority is to raise kind, considerate, resilient human beings. How do I do that? Oh, I set my boundaries and I stand by it. I teach them when is an appropriate time to ask for help and enable them to help themselves if it's not a good time for me.
I'm not an expert in marriage at all, although I'm very fortunate to have a beautiful one. However, I would say you can teach your husband or your support system in the very same modalities that you teach your children.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of parallels in that too. Because I follow a lot of parenting coaches and I'm like, that's true for marriage. So yeah, you can for sure use the same thing with your husband. Anytime you're annoyed with something, think about why you're annoyed. Okay, don't just jump in and be like, God, why are you being so annoying? Just stop. Just get quiet and be like, what about that annoys me? Does that usually annoy me? Or is it just today? What about today? And what do I want instead? That question alone is something that doesn't get asked often enough. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone on calls with people who are like, help me. And I'm like, okay, what are your challenges? And then they have this whole story, very easy, comes out of their mouth, right? Like butter. And then I'm like, okay, what would you like instead? And they're like, and they have such a hard time answering it. So let's practice thinking about what we want instead. Because if we don't know what we're working towards and we're just avoiding things, then it's like the difference of having a clear goal in mind and making aligned decisions and being intentional from being reactive all the time.
And resentful.
Yeah. So then instead of going from version 1.0 to version, I don't know, 2, 3, 5, you're going from 1 to 1.1 to 1.2. Like, that is the best way for you to leapfrog whatever's going on right now, is for you to get clear on what you want and keeping promises that you make for yourself, honoring that.
You totally nailed it, right? Because so many women don't ask themselves, well, what do I want? What will make me feel fulfilled? So if you look at the areas of your life, your finances, your relationships, your home life, your career, your family, and these things are not hitting an 8, 9, 10 for you internally, then that's the first question to ask. What do I want? And more importantly, I would argue, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel inside of my marriage? How do I want to feel with my finances? How do I want to feel about my career? Because our emotions are always our guidance system, right? And so if we're recognizing that we want to feel fulfilled or we want to feel validated or we want to feel like we're inspiring somebody, we're doing good work in the world, seen, and we don't feel that way, then we can start figuring out, well, what are the actions I need to take so that I can feel that way? Right. And this is where it comes to keeping that promise to yourself, because some of these things are small shifts that we can make in a nanosecond, right? Maybe it's an internal shift towards gratitude. Maybe it's an internal shift towards how you want to feel as a person of value in the world. And then once we understand that, we can say, well, what else do I have to do? Maybe I have to apply for a new job, or maybe I have to have that uncomfortable conversation with my husband, or maybe I have to shut the TV off every single night and play a game with my kids. But if you're out of alignment in any of those main areas of your life, they're not that 8, 9, 10 that you're hoping for. It's because you're out of integrity with yourself. And it's not anybody's problem but your own. So when you can shift to that mirror, that looking glass on yourself, you can ask yourself, like you just said, well, what do I actually want? How do I really want to feel? And then what small steps do I need to make to get there? I'm not suggesting you completely overhaul your life. As a mom, that feels daunting. That feels overwhelming. And so we don't take any action. But you can ask yourself, what small steps do I need to make so I can feel better about this? And then the tricky part is you actually have to show up for yourself. You actually have to do it. You can think about these things all you want and get nothing done. The magic is in the taking action and being okay with imperfect action. The way you create change within yourself, within your life, is not by making monumental changes. It's about making small shifts with consistency, time and time again, so that you all of a sudden become the person that you want to be.
Yes, absolutely. And this is so much in alignment with when I say, if you want the marriage that you envision, you have to be the kind of wife that has that marriage. It's an evolution, it's a transformation. Same for motherhood, right? If you want to have a different relationship with your kids, what kind of mom has that relationship with their kids? What can you start to do differently? Can you take a breath before you talk? Can you start to approach them with more gentleness, conscious communication? Can you be more ahead of the game, like knowing your child? Can you plan ahead better on what to anticipate instead of just being frazzled all the time? If you're frazzled all the time, how can you defrazzle yourself so that you feel more present and connected with what's going on in the everyday, right? So I love that you brought up, like, how do you want to feel? Because that's really your guidance. Like, if you don't like how you're feeling right now, how would you like to feel instead? And what can you do to help yourself feel that way? That looks different for everyone. And then the accountability, your personal accountability, taking action, taking steady action until you get to that place where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm here, right? And if you're having trouble with knowing what to do, but you know you want to feel differently, and you know you want it to look differently, and you're like, I don't know how to get from step one to whatever it is, 100. That's what we're here for. Reach out to Dena. She's got your back. She's walked through the fire. She can tell you, hey, it works. She's helped so many people do this. And she's told me she has a membership. Can you talk to us about that?
I do. I have a wonderful membership for moms called the Revolutionary Mom Club. It is a space to expand personally and within your parental roles. So every month there is a training on personal development and on parenting so that you can start to feel better and take action for yourself, both as a mom and an individual. It's a community support system with tons of information about mindfulness and the way that our brains work, the way they work in relation to our children, and how we can keep these commitments to ourselves so that we make sure we are showing up for ourselves every step of the way. And now, something I didn't mention, but I shared with you earlier, as a mom, it's so important to have weight behind your actions because we all know as moms that our children don't do what we tell them to, but they do what they see, right? And so if you're a mom who wants all of these things for herself and doesn't take action, well, what are you teaching your kids? You're not teaching your kids to be a go-getter. You're not teaching your kids to be ambitious. You're not teaching your kids to have a fulfilling life because you're not willing to do the same, right? And so there's nothing more important as a mom than teaching your kids that their dreams are possible by having the willingness and the courage to go after your own. And so whether that's in your marriage, in your career, in your home life, you have to be willing to be the example for your children. Otherwise, they're going to just learn and pick up that same cycle that you're riding on, which is wanting one thing, doing another, being miserable and resentful, and continuously coming back to that place.
Yeah. And that takes courage. Okay. We're not downplaying that this is like super easy. So just do this, right? It's challenging when you're on that path where you're like holding that mirror up to yourself and you don't like what you see. We've all been there. Okay. And it doesn't mean that you're a horrible person. The fact that you're willing to see that is a lot. It's a lot. And you deserve a pat on the back, a celebration, a party for being willing to do that. Because, like Dena shared, there are two types of people who blame and just say that it's everybody else's fault and it's their circumstances, and people who are willing to be like, oh, actually, it's me. So it's okay if you're noticing, oh, I have a lot to work on. Girl, join the club. Okay? Join the club. We are not perfect. We are human beings. And we get to grow. I like to view ourselves as a masterpiece. It's like a never ending thing, right? It's like the Sagrada Familia. That church took, let's see, so many years to finish. And it's the most beautiful church inside. If you haven't seen it, go visit. If you go to Barcelona, I want you to view yourself as this. You are not broken, okay? You are doing the best you can with what you know, with what you've seen, and what you've been taught. And you can also get your butt back in the driver's seat and say, this is where we're going now. And continue to work on yourself. Give yourself grace. It takes time and resilience to change. And you can do this. You can totally do this. And don't forget to, by the way, take breaks and look back and see how far you've come, because there's always going to be another peak that you're working towards. And if you keep focusing on where you're going, you won't realize how far you've come, right? I think there's this phrase where it's like, there was a point in your life where you wished for something that you have now. So while you are working on yourself, don't forget to savor the moments where you're like, I made it. I didn't yell today. Or it took me longer to yell. Or I thought twice before yelling, right? Celebrate the small wins. There's literally no win too small, especially when it comes to your own personal awareness and growth.
That's so true. And to me, the most important word that you used explaining that, Michelle, well, there were two, but the one that is highlighted to me, it's that word and. Every time you hear yourself say but, replace it with an and see how that feels. Does that feel more honest for you? Right? Because like you mentioned, it takes an incredible amount of courage to look within yourself and say, okay, if there are things in my life that don't feel good, how have I contributed to them? That takes an incredible amount of courage. It takes an incredible amount of integrity, and it takes an incredible amount of honesty. So if you're in that place where you have that willingness, right? Because it starts with willingness. When you have that willingness to examine what's happening within you that has created this life that doesn't feel great, give yourself credit for it. There's no such thing as a perfect woman, as a perfect mom, but because we're so addicted to social media, we like to believe that's the truth all the time. You know, I teach parenting, I work with moms, and I am such an imperfect mom all the time because it's not about perfection. It's about being authentic. It's about having integrity. It's about showing up when it's uncomfortable and teaching your children that it is okay to be a beginner. It is okay to be scared and brave at the same time. And it is okay, in fact, it's expected to be an imperfect human being that continues to try.
We are always a beginner in motherhood. We have never been a mom of the kids that we have at the stage that they're at all times. So if you're wondering, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, us too. We're all just doing our best, learning through the process, fumbling sometimes, and it's just part of it. Okay, so give yourself grace. You deserve it. And actually, I want that to be probably the first promise that you give yourself and honor is to give yourself grace. Okay. So thank you so much, Dena, for being a part of this show, for having this amazing conversation with me, because I want more moms to know what they're doing and that they get to change that. And it doesn't have to be like this crazy thing that happens where they flip their world upside down. It really is just in the small shifts that create almost like avalanche of like positive impact on your life. Okay. So if people have loved listening to our conversation and they're like, I need some more Dena in my life, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
I do most of my sharing on Facebook. I always encourage people to find me directly, Dena Farash. Please send me a friend request, send me a message, let me know that you heard me on Michelle's podcast. I run a free Facebook group called the Mindful Mom Revolution. I'm also on TikTok as my name and Instagram as the Mindful Mom Revolution. I absolutely love connecting with women and helping to support moms in any phase of transition that they're in.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So before you leave, I love to ask my guests a question so listeners can get to know them a little better. Are you ready?
Yeah, I am. I'm excited and nervous.
What's a food you can eat every day and never get sick of it?
Ice cream.
Yeah? What's your favorite flavor or flavors?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I like things in my ice cream. I know that sounds really weird, but I like the toppings already inside. So I like a moose tracks because it's got peanut butter cups. By the way, P.S., this is why I'm in the gym all the time too, because I could eat ice cream all day, every day, and never get sick of it. I don't think I've ever been at a place in my life where I've said, you know what, I think I've had enough ice cream.
So do you love Cold Stone then? Because like they do all the mix-ins.
I do love the concept of Cold Stone. Absolutely. I do love the concept of Cold Stone because I don't want the things on top of my ice cream. I definitely want it on the inside. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
What's your food?
Okay, so I've got two. I love noodles and I love chicken wings. Those are the two things like I would just die happy eating forever. There's just so much like versatility, and they both carry sauces really well, especially fresh noodles, whether it's pasta or Chinese noodles or Vietnamese noodles or whatever it is. Like, yes, please, thank you. I'm going to Japan soon, and I cannot wait to just eat all the noodles.
Awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited for you to eat all of the noodles. I hope that you share some photos of it.
Oh, I will be taking so many food pictures. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for making it all the way to the end of this episode. We covered so much here, so much that I want to see you integrate into your life. And if you are willing to do that and accept this challenge, I want you to tell us that you're doing this so we can cheer you on and support you along the way. Let us know how much this episode has impacted your life and share it with a friend. If you're like, ooh, I know exactly the person who needs to hear this, feel free to share it. Okay. So if you love this episode, go check out Dena's Facebook group, go check out her TikTok, Instagram, her membership. Okay. Let her know that you found her from this episode. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And I'll catch you back here on the next episode. Bye, everyone. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. I would so appreciate that. And if you love what I share here, then you're going to love and want to join my free private Facebook community that's also called Marriage and Motherhood. I hope to see and connect with you in there. Otherwise, I'll catch you back here for the next episode. Bye!